So a thorough history and really understanding how the body works with the mind-body connection is huge. I tell patients this almost every day in practice. I tell somebody this. We're the only country in the world that separates the mind from the body.
Yeah.
The only country. In Chinese medicine, we say things like it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you. That's a huge one. Even the little, they call them like the curanderas, the Mexican medicine women will say, oh, honey, what's bothering you?
Yeah.
You know, your tummy hurts. What's happening in your life? Like, we're the only country that separates them completely. So that's a huge connection, is just figuring out what's going on in that person's life, what happened when they got sick, when their symptoms started.
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Plus podcast. I'm your host, Karina Rachel, and I'm joined today by Dr. Tenesha Wards. She's a doctor of chiropractic with a background in applied kinesiology, functional nutrition, and acupuncture. Dr. Wards, thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
Definitely. So I've seen so many comments over the years, either on our YouTube channel or just from people I've known, that they can't figure out, or their doctor can't figure out, what's wrong with them. And it just kind of fuels this confusion and frustration. Is that something that you commonly see?
That is my passion. That is absolutely what we love to do when they walk in the door. If they're a medical mystery, that's what we're most excited about. They've been told, we don't know why you feel like this. We don't know why you're tired. It must be chronic fatigue. And we don't know why you're in pain. It must be fibromyalgia. In our practice, we don't accept that. It's just, this is just the way it is. Your body's decided to stop functioning, or the body's decided to just break down for no reason.
Right.
We absolutely feel there's a core root cause, there's a reason, and we dig until we find it.
Right.
That's what we like to do.
So can you maybe just lay out a little bit of the protocol, so to speak? How do you approach a situation where someone comes in and you kind of have to, like you said, get out the magnifying glass to try and figure out, well, what is the root cause behind all of their issues?
You know, it's different for everybody. Our starting point's different for everybody, and sometimes just finding out where that starting point is a hard part. But getting a history, and sometimes I'll go back to age 0 to 12. Did you have this, and this? What was going on in your life? What was happening? Were you exposed to things like ticks, toxins, parasites? What was life like? Where'd you grow up? So we definitely do a very thorough history. We point out all the major stressors or events in people's lives. 90% of our patients, when we dig into, okay, when did you start having this symptom? It happened 2014. Okay, what happened in 2012, 2013, leading up to 2014? And 90% of them some of them will just cry or just have this epiphany moment of, that's when I went through X, or that's when I had, this stressor happen, or this family event happen. So we definitely find a lot of mind-body connection. That's one thing that we do, is a really thorough history.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of medical practices right now spend 5 to 7 minutes with the patient, even a new patient, and they just don't have that time to dig in and figure out, when did this happen? What was going on in your life? How did it start? So a thorough history and really understanding how the body works with the mind-body connection is huge. I tell patients this almost every day in practice. I tell somebody this. We're the only country in the world that separates the mind from the body.
Yeah.
The only country. In Chinese medicine, we say things like it's not what you're eating, it's what's eating you. That's a huge one. Even the little, they call them like the curanderas, the Mexican medicine women will say, oh, honey, what's bothering you?
Yeah.
Your tummy hurts. What's happening in your life? Like, we're the only country that separates them completely. So that's a huge connection, is just figuring out what's going on in that person's life, what happened when they got sick, when their symptoms started. Another one is we use applied kinesiology, or muscle testing. So that's a way for us to communicate with the body by asking it questions, using a feedback loop of how the body responds to certain stimulation, or we call it challenging certain organs.
Okay.
Using acupuncture meridian points. And so that can kind of lead us into, okay, this may have started in the liver. What's your toxic load look like? What medications have you been on? Where did you grow up? What water were you drinking? Do you are you exposed to toxins and different things? So that's one way, but we also do blood testing. We do saliva hormone testing. We can do brain chemistry, neurotransmitter testing in urine. We test for things like Lyme disease, which sometimes can be a big underlying culprit, and that's my history and why I got into this.
Okay.
And then we do a lot of genetic testing and just finding what's out of balance, giving the body what it is lacking, and taking away what's in excess. Just those two things alone allow the body to heal itself and to balance.
Can you maybe talk a little bit more about your own experience with Lyme disease?
Yeah. So I was 14 years old at the time and grew up in Michigan, and woke up one day literally unable to move most of the joints of my body, covered from the waist down in a red rash, which was not a bullseye rash, which is what Lyme disease typically sees. And we now know only about 30% of patients actually present with that bullseye rash.
Okay.
So a doctor's quick to dismiss it. Oh, you didn't have the bullseye rash. One of them was. That's not true. One of them did kind of bullseye out, but then it went on my legs, both legs. So,
wow.
But again, they didn't jump to that. I remember my mom calling my doctor. They said, oh, she's got a weird rash. Bring her in through the back door. Like, I was quarantined. I was kind of like the kid in the bubble. Like, we don't know what's wrong with her. And that just led down this huge path of going to doctor to doctor to doctor and nobody figuring out what's wrong. And I've had every diagnosis under the sun until they ruled it out. I had MS. I had rheumatic fever, rheumatoid arthritis. I mean, they thought I had everything, and then they would find out, nope, that's not it. Scarlet fever is one of them, they thought. And I was put on steroids, which made things worse. That's not a good thing for Lyme disease patients to be put on. It kind of actually feeds the bugs, I guess, a little bit, or makes them more active. So I continued to get worse, and finally my mom did her own research and took me to a doctor that was like, yeah, let's test for Lyme disease. And fortunately, it came back positive. Most blood tests are only about 60% accurate.
Okay, wow.
And so through years and years of natural remedies as well as some Western medicine technology, I was able to recover, and that's why I do what I do now. And
wow, I just can't imagine being 14 when we're supposed to be so active and energetic and all of this, and then to have something that just, completely wipes you out.
Yeah, I missed a lot of school. I was in a lot of pain. I would literally have to run my fingers under warm water in the morning just to get them to bend, to just function. And again, everybody's like, we don't know what's wrong with her. We don't really know. Let's try this. Let's try that. And it was really frustrating, as you can imagine, for my whole family.
Yeah.
My mom drugged me everywhere, and it was a lot, for sure. And kind of lost, I would say 6 months to a year of my life, which is a lot what we see patients come in. Like, fortunately, my mom was persistent and decided, like, I'm not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
Of we don't know.
Or
we just
I don't know. I'm not taking I don't know for an answer.
That's exactly what it was. I don't know. You're going to have to live like this. We have patients that come in that have felt like this for decades.
Oh, my
decades.
Goodness.
We had a patient recently, maybe within the last year. We're talking, and I'm going through her history, and she's been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and chronic pain syndrome and anxiety disorder and depression. Because when you feel bad and you hurt, like I went through that too, you just
understandably are going to feel unhappy.
And then the anxiety of what's wrong with me? Is this going to get worse? Am I ever going to get my life back? Right? So she had the whole diagnosis and on multiple medications. This is the craziest story. We're going through, and what happened to you age 0 to 12, 12 to 20, anything worth noting. And then finally at the end, she's like, one thing. Yeah, growing up in Wisconsin, I think, she said, yeah, I had tick fever a bunch of times. And I'm like, tick fever? I hadn't even heard that term. I've heard of like Rocky Mountain spotted fever and some other things. What do you mean tick fever? Yeah, sometimes people in the area would get bit by a tick and have a fever, which I had as well, and rashes and feel sick. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you've had Lyme disease since you've been a child, and you're in your 50s, and you've been sick
oh my goodness.
4 decades. Yeah, so...
And 4 decades of doctors, and none of them could figure that out.
Totally. And she had what they call co-infections too, which is other tick-borne diseases. So yeah, that happens a lot. So a lot of it is listening to the patient, also understanding that they're in their body. So, they know what's off. They know it's off.
Right.
If somebody says, I just don't feel right, like that's a powerful statement. I just don't feel like myself, or I just don't feel normal. And I think we're quick in our society to say, oh, okay, must be mental illness. Here's this, which it still can be, but sometimes it's something much deeper.
Right. And you can just imagine that if the body is in, a state of crisis by trying to deal with an infection or deal with some kind of part of the body that just isn't functioning, just that stress physically that the body's enduring is going to create that emotional and mental stress as well. So you can really... Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned earlier about the, separation of the mind-body connection. And it is really interesting how, you're completely right. In this culture, not only are they not considered to affect each other, but it's almost like there's a big giant concrete wall they try to put between them that like your physical state has nothing to do with your mental state and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people incredibly frustrated just from that one piece alone. And you start to let them just understand that actually your emotional and mental stress can have a lot of effects on your physical health. Absolutely. And immediately the little puzzle pieces start to kind of fall into place for them.
Yeah, we have separate doctors here for it, right? Like, oh, you're also sad and depressed and anxious, you have to go somewhere else.
Right.
It certainly can't be the physical part. We're looking at the whole body is just not something that is regularly done. You kind of have to really seek out somebody who's going to take that perspective, and it's few and far between and hard to find. So
yeah,
it's unfortunate.
And then your father had health issues as well. Is that right?
He did. Yep. So as a child, he was diagnosed with MS, so when they diagnosed me with MS, we're like, I don't really know if that's, it certainly isn't something that is typically hereditary. So he did, and he had mercury fillings removed, and his symptoms got significantly better.
Wow.
So we believe that a big part of it was, he still has some residual issues and some other things, I think, that are permanent from the sclerosing, the hardening in the brain. So MS is just scar tissue in the brain. The body attacking its own brain. It's an autoimmune disease. Well, why is the body attacking its own brain? Like, it didn't just wake up one day and say, we don't like this organ anymore. We're just gonna go after it.
Right.
We're just gonna get it out of the body and attack it. And so that attacking is hardening in the brain. And so a lot of people have found and believe that certain people can have sensitivities or problems detoxing or methylating, which is a word that we use for the body's ability to recognize what's wrong and it needs to get rid of it. We can find that out genetically, but some people can't really get rid of certain toxins, and mercury is one of them. I mean, I do believe mercury is pretty toxic anyway. Right. But to some people, it can completely just cause issues. We do know it can pass the blood-brain barrier. Say that 3 times fast. But it passes the blood-brain barrier, so it can get into the brain, and then the body's attacking that foreign substance, and that can be one cause, we believe, of MS. Also, a lot of people believe that Lyme disease can cross the blood-brain barrier, and the body attacks the bugs in the brain, and that can cause sclerosing, because all MS means is multiple, so more than one, sclerosing, which is hardening in the brain.
Wow.
And so, so he was about 7 or 8 when he first got sick with that, so I saw a lot of that as well, and it took a while to diagnose, and yeah.
Wow. Well, and I think to have any recovery from multiple sclerosis is incredible. So even though he's, still having some of those residual effects, just to have a significant improvement is incredible.
Most people just go downhill, end up in a wheelchair and kind of, start losing function of certain parts of the body. Like, that can be what happens. So, yeah, it was a dentist who said, hey, this could be, they did their own research. And then it was a more, natural-minded dentist was like, yeah, let's take this mercury out and do some detoxing and see if that's part of it.
Wow.
And they were doing all kinds of things before they did that, like everything right down to bee stings, because that was supposed to help some of the nerves, like, regenerate, is getting stung by bees. Yeah, I mean, my parents were trying everything to, help him and figure out what was going on. And it was something so complicated, but as simple as there's toxic stuff in your mouth.
Right.
So since then, we as children, if we had to get a filling, we only got the porcelain glass fillings, which don't last as long as mercury, but they're not
toxic.
Yeah, they're not
Completely
they're not
lethally toxic.
They're not a neurotoxin. Yeah,
Wow.
That's been huge.
Wow. So what's another common medical mystery that you see in your practice?
Definitely a lot of times it can be Lyme disease. A lot of times chronic fatigue we find out to be a dysfunction with the adrenal glands, which also involves the thyroid, which can cause hormone issues. So if somebody's under huge stresses like fight or flight, or they've gone through stressful times in their life, their adrenal glands pump out adrenaline and cortisol, and it does this to keep you upright, and it's going to, rob Peter to pay Paul. It's going to steal nutrients from other places and energy from other places to keep you upright, because the body's brilliant and its number one priority is to run from the bear or the tiger,
Right.
keep you safe, keep you upright, which today could be a boss or a spouse or a divorce or
Right.
financial problems or the IRS. So, we think we're in fight or flight. Well, we're meant to do that for seconds or minutes to run from something into safety, right? Like our body's designed to do that, but it's not meant to do it for weeks, months, years. So what will happen is the adrenaline, the adrenals are way up here and the body's like, I'm under attack. We see things like weight gain, fatigue, we could see hair falling out, but what we mostly see is then the thyroid's like, whoa, the thyroid and adrenals are inversely proportionate to each other.
Okay.
The thyroid's like, whoa, slow it down, you're gonna keel over. You
Right.
hear about stressed out CFOs or CEOs just having a heart attack or something, right? We're like, whoa, slow down. And then the thyroid's trying to slow down the adrenals to bring back homeostasis. And now you have hypothyroidism. Or sometimes it's not even caught. It's called, they call it chronic fatigue. And sometimes they'll fix the thyroid. They'll give you, thyroid medication or hormones, or you do different things for the thyroid. But sometimes if the underlying cause is really the adrenal glands and the thyroid, people are just we see this a lot. They get put on a medication like Synthroid, and it works for a while. People are like, ooh, I have energy, my hair's growing back, like I feel good, I'm sleeping well, because that's another one. Sometimes people will be exhausted during the day, but then can't sleep. We call that wired and tired. You have that afternoon dip at 3 p.m. or 2 p.m., like you just can't keep your eyes open, but then 3 p.m. you're like, wide awake, can I clean my house? Should I finish, emails?
Right.
I've definitely given and gotten emails at 3 a.m., so I'm like, oh, that person is going through this. So anyway, they have that, fatigue. They get on Synthroid. They might feel a little bit better for a couple months, and then like, oh, it's not working anymore. So then they have to get their medication upped. Okay, now it's working again, and then upped, and the numbers, start looking normal on labs, but they never quite feel right because they didn't address the adrenals are burned out. And so that's often just not even looked at. Western medicine doesn't really recognize adrenal fatigue until it's something called Addison's disease. And that's where the adrenals have just completely given up and you're just not getting out of bed. Like you've just completely hit a wall where the adrenals are they've gone down, they've been down, and you're just not functioning.
Right.
But there's this huge gray area of weeks, months, years to where until you get to that point. I mean, there's other causes that can cause Addison's disease, but chronic fatigue of being under stress can do it. And so we try to get them before they get to that.
Right. And so is that something that y'all can see in the testing that you do, actually being able to look at function of the thyroid, function of the adrenals in the context of what else is going on with them?
Yeah, so the best test for adrenal function is a 24-hour cortisol test where you spit into a little tube, and we use a saliva test for that, and you take a morning cortisol, midday, evening, and then night. And in a perfect adrenal functioning person, we're den animals, right? Like we should come up with the sun and go down. We just, like, who does that? Right, in our society, right? But our cortisol should be highest in the morning, and it should slowly come down and then plateau, go down for sleep. And so if you take these samples throughout the 24 hours and we see cortisol's tanked and there's 4 stages. Cortisol is tanked in the morning, and then you have this spike in the afternoon, and it rises into the evening. Like that's definitely an adrenal fatigue problem. Sometimes it's just a little low in the morning, and then it dips really huge in the afternoon, then it comes back up. We can see all different patterns with that. So that's one way to test the adrenals, and that rarely gets tested. Sometimes patients will come in and it's just flatlined. Like we just see your adrenal glands have given up.
They've
on you.
checked out.
Yeah,
they're like, we're out of here.
Yep, they are not even chugging along anymore like the little engine. Like they have just, you've depleted them. Your life has been stressful for a long time and they're just done. So that's definitely one way to test the adrenals. But yeah, you have to also look at the thyroid because they're antagonistic of each other. And how we look at the thyroid is in blood testing. And most labs give us kind of a range from here to here, which is the pathological range, which is a synonym for disease. We're looking at a much smaller range, kind of a functional range, like something maybe a low normal or a high normal. And a lot of times their doctor will say, oh, let's watch it. Let's give it 6 months. Let's see how you do. Well, give it 6 months and it's going to be in the, low range. Why do that? We look at low normals and high normals and also just try to get the body functioning at its most optimal. In the functional range.
If you'd like to hear this full episode, it's available for free on your favorite podcast apps, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. To view the full video version of this episode and hundreds of life-changing health and wellness videos, head over to wellnessplus.tv or become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/Psychetruth. All of the links are available for you down in the description below, and if you enjoyed this content, be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell.